I'm John Lund, a PhD student at the University of Utah, and I'll be presenting about our paper, Less is More, Exploring Support for Time Management Planning, which Dr. Jason Wiese and I worked on together. Think back to the last time you felt overwhelmed by the things you had to get done and sat down to make a plan. What did you reach for? There are thousands of time management applications available on the web and app stores, but prior literature tells us that probably you reached for pen and paper, a notes app or word processor, or maybe just made mental notes, even if you had a dedicated time management app on hand. Why is this? And what can we do to improve the way we design to support planning? For this work, we set out to design software which could adequately support the practice of time management planning, or TMP. This form of planning is defined as determining tasks to be performed on a particular day, prioritizing and scheduling the order of such tasks, and sketching out the approximate amount of time to be spent on each task. In other words, time management planning is determining what will be done and when during the upcoming day. Time management literature discusses planning as a critical practice, but largely provides only descriptions of what planning involves and its benefits, but not how people actually do it. From related literature, we derived principles of effective planning, further discussed in the full paper, and attempted this initial design. Our approach with this initial design came from thinking that the ideal form of planning incorporates each of its components into a unified process, and that the best way to support it was to make these practices inherent in the structure of the plan. For example, by only allowing one item per time, users must explicitly determine the tasks that will be completed and at what particular time, and how this impacts their other plans. Additionally, determining tasks to do on a particular day and prioritizing have to be done, as the user faces all of their upcoming responsibilities when they see unspoken for time. In other words, our thinking was that planning tools had not been useful to people in the past because they did not structure data in the right way to support the important components of the process of planning. While we felt this approach would be successful based on a review of planning theory, we needed to understand more about what people actually do in planning to confirm or refute our thinking. We conducted semi-structured interviews with 19 graduate students about their current planning practices, examining what tools they use and what common mechanics and methods they employed. We then conducted a 5-day diary study where these same participants were asked to plan according to guidelines we specified, to see how they would respond to planning according to a predefined process like our initial design follows. Our goal was to understand how people currently engage in planning and how they might respond to our initial design approach. So what did we learn from this study? The experiences of our participants showed us that our initial design and framing were flawed for a few reasons. Different people approach planning with different methods. The same person plans differently on different days, depending on factors like their workload, stress level, or unexpected circumstances. And the ways participants use tools to plan sometimes actually depended on their imprecision and flexibility, in contrast to this highly structured and precision-oriented design we presented earlier. Let's discuss these points in a little more detail. The main methods of planning we observed were creating a schedule, creating a to-do list, and pausing and resuming. These are described in more detail in the full paper, but I'll briefly discuss the second, creating a to-do list. For each method, we paid particular attention to the end format of the plan and what steps participants took to create it. In the case of creating a to-do list, we observed participants review their current tasks in sources such as existing to-do lists, email, or their memory, review scheduled events to remember related tasks they needed to complete, and then create a new to-do list of task items to complete for the given day. The end format is something like what you see on the right there. You can already begin to see a disconnect between this common method of planning we observed and our original design. If someone only wanted to review and then list out tasks to complete for the day, they would quickly be frustrated by this initial design, where tasks must be assigned to a specific time block in order to appear on the plan. While our initial design supports one method of planning, and thus one group of people, there are others it does not support at all. We also found that our participants' methods of planning changed depending on contextual factors, such as workload or stress level. For example, one participant would move from a pause and resume method to making to-do lists for their time in the lab if they had a lot going on. Another said that they regularly switched back and forth between to-do lists and scheduled times for tasks, depending on their general stress level. In other words, there are not just between individual differences in approaches, but also within individual differences that occur regularly in this population. As a result, even for those our initial design supported, their methods were likely to change, meaning its usefulness would be even further limited. Finally, our design revealed that planning happens in unstructured tools, and the ways participants use tools to plan sometimes depended on their imprecision and flexibility rather than it being a hindrance to the process. As I said, planning happens in unstructured tools. Tools like pen and paper, notes applications, email drafts, or word processors. Only rarely did our participants use specialized time management tools such as to-do list managers or even digital calendars to actually capture their plans. This was in part due to the ways our participants interacted with their personal data and tools when planning. In this example here, we can see how the flexible format of a notes application was leveraged to allow for imprecise time assignments for tasks. While there are some scheduled items like the 9:30 run and 12 o'clock appointment, the tasks between these items have no associated time. Because of the unstructured nature of the application, this interaction is obvious and easy to perform, yet it's actually difficult to reproduce in something like a digital calendar or even our initial design, because tasks must have an assigned time to appear in a relative position with other items in these tools. This participant didn't need to know exactly what time they would wash the dishes and countertops, just that it needed to happen between 9:30 and 12. These interactions showed us a different way of approaching planning than we originally imagined would be best to support. When engaging in planning, they jotted down notes, scribbled things out, and rearranged sections of their plans as they created them. They used unstructured tools, not just because they were on hand, but because these tools allowed them to adapt to their needs even within a single day. The whole experience was more draft-like and imprecise than specialized tools often allow, with a mix of scheduled events, notes, and tasks with vague start and end times, such as by 5 p.m. or on the way back from campus. In our initial design, persistence and structure are not just suggested, they're required. If you're not sure how long studying for an exam or even lunch will take, there's no flexibility. You have to decide when things will start and stop, as well as their precise position in the day, even for tasks or entire days where this really isn't necessary or appropriate. With this perspective, it became clear our initial framing and approach to design based on theory were misaligned with the role of planning and how it happens in practice. Rather than focusing on structuring our design in the right way to support one particular planning practice or process, our findings showed us we needed to leverage flexible formats to support the planning process the user needs. We decided to take a new approach, asking, can we support the current practices we observed happening in general purpose tools better, rather than requiring that best practices occur in a structured way? Our design on the right here, based on this framing, takes the form of a domain-specific notes application. At its core, it behaves just like a text editor. Writing text, copying, pasting, etc. all occur as expected, but some of the common interactions we observed in our participants' planning earlier are specifically designed for. More details about the design can be found in the full paper. Overall, this design seeks to accommodate planning in a variety of forms, better than the general purpose tools currently used to accomplish it. This flexibility is important not only because of the differences between people, but also between how an individual plans on different days. We can leverage these types of designs to accommodate the adaptations users need to make in a domain like time management. Other domains with similar characteristics may also benefit from this approach to design, and our, and we hope others' future work will focus on how to continue to guide users toward improving important practices such as planning without requiring best practices or relying on heavily structured approaches. Thank you for watching this presentation. Please see our full paper for more details on our study and findings, and feel free to contact us with any questions or comments about our work. Thanks again.